American presidential garbage here. Vivek Ramaswamy. No money to show as far as. Oh, let's fucking join the YouTubes here before we jump into this. What am I doing? Add the YouTubes. Here, YouTubes. Come on in. Alright, YouTubes. But yeah, Vivek, we are going to go through. No, we don't need a manual. Just start the broadcast. So Vivek Ramaswamy, no money to show of to. When you first announced like that, you were doing all your own money. You don't have to show anything for the first year. So until they get to primary season, we're not going to actually show what they have. But as an initial representative here, we can look at see who they're giving money to. Oh, they're very rich. So they're giving money to a Republican in California, a Republican in Ohio, Tom Cotton, who they're not even going to show. Oh, those are state seats. Tom Cotton is from Arkansas, I believe. So the Arkansas Republican giving a lot of money to Tom Cotton. Just $10,000 to the Republican Party of Ohio, $1,000 to Margaret Steiger. Some more money to the Republican Party of Ohio, money to the Republican Party of Connecticut. Kelly Loeffler, a Republican. Matt Mowers, a Republican. So he has a lot of money to give. Just the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Mary Fay, David Perdue, who's a billionaire. Like, he did not need anybody's money. Jesus, look at all these people he's giving money to. These are all in the last couple of years. Just so many people, obviously all Republicans across many, many states, many state Republican parties, New York, California, Ohio. He's giving money everywhere, all right? So, do you think he has influence already? Yes. Does this person already have influence? All right, let's watch some of this. And I'm not going to say we're watching all of it. That would be ridiculous. But we'll watch the first 15 minutes or so.
Pleased to bring to you guys a discussion that I'm going to have with Vivek Ramaswamy. I've been paying attention to his campaign. He should be discussed more. And I'm just interested to hear what he has to say. That's what's coming up today on Candace Owens. All right, guys, Vivek Ramaswamy. I have been talking to you guys about him on the show. I find him to be the most interesting candidate in the field for a lot of reasons. What he is saying is just good sense, and it also allows us to have a conversation about somebody other than Trump and DeSantis. For some reason, people think they're the only two people in the race. He's got a lot of great ideas, and I think you're probably all having the same questions I have. Where did he come from? Why is he suddenly running out of nowhere? Is this just an ego thing? Is he just trying to get his name out there? What is this really about? Vivek, welcome to the show.
It's good to see you, Candace. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm interested. So I want to start from the very beginning. First off, just introducing who you are. Where do you come from? What state are you from? Where were you born? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, sure thing. Yes, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm talking to you from my home base in Columbus today, which is where our family lives. But my parents were immigrants from India. They came over in the late 1970s and early 1980s, my dad and my mom. They didn't have a lot of money. We didn't grow up particularly rich, but it was a, education-focused family, as you might expect of first-generation Indian immigrants. And ended up growing up in a pretty poor public school, actually, through about 8th grade. But then they actually ended up deciding to switch me to a private school so that we could actually focus on academics. So I went to St. X High School in Cincinnati. I still am actually on the board of that high school to this day. And that was a big part of where actually my moral education, I would say, began and shaped a lot of my views on the educational system. But anyway, St. X in Cincinnati had a big impact on my upbringing. And then I ended up going to Harvard for college. Thought I was going to be a scientist. I was this nerdy guy in the lab for most of college. So that was me. But when I graduated, I decided that, the time horizon of just spending around, working on 10-year projects in a lab was a little bit not my speed. And so I ended up getting into the world of biotech investing in New York City. I joined this hedge fund in the fall of 2007, right before the '08 financial crisis. That actually shaped a lot of my views on capitalism to this day. It was a heck of an experience in a good way from a learning perspective as a 22-year-old guy. I did that for 7 years. I had this itch about 3 years in. I had been so science-centric that I decided that I wanted to study law and political philosophy. I had never really done that. So I spent 3 years in law school at Yale from 2010 to 2013. They let me keep my job as an investor. And so those ended up being 3 productive years. Met my wife. She was my next door neighbor. She was in med school at the time. Anyway, long story short is after all of that happened, I founded a biotech company. I decided I was sick of the pharma industry. It's actually a really deeply broken industry. We could have a whole hour about that. It's an industry that behaves like the government because it's a monopoly industry. It's regulated by the FDA. I wasn't thinking about this from a governmental perspective at the time, but the good news is as an entrepreneur, that creates a lot of opportunity when you have an industry that behaves like a government. And so anyway, I started a biotech company that was designed to challenge big pharma and basically focus on developing these drugs that for bureaucratic reasons, they just decided weren't the drugs they actually wanted to develop. And it ended up being the backbone of building a multi-billion-dollar company that I built as CEO for 7 years. 5 medicines I worked on are approved drugs for patients today. The one I'm personally most proud of is a drug for prostate cancer that I can definitely say would not exist if it weren't for, the steps that I took in my years as CEO.
$1 billion company, handful of medicines over a handful of years. That means they abstract a massive amount of wealth from their insurance and from their people who are trying to just save their lives by cancer treatments. AKA, fuck you, dude. You're making money off of people trying to survive. That's not a good capitalist venture. That is a horribly corrupt, horrible system.
But I stepped down from my job as a CEO. I think you and I talked about this on your documentary for a very different reason. It was in the wake of the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter protests across this country that there was a demand for me to make a statement as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar biotech company in favor of Black Lives Matter. I refused to do it. And that set up a 6-month, I would say journey is what I'll call it. I described it in Woke Inc., but a 6-month journey that resulted in advisors to my company stepping down, very prominent people. And I decided that, look, nobody's forcing me to step down. It's my company. I was the founder. I was the CEO. So I didn't have a boss per se. But it was clear that if I was going to continue speaking my mind as a citizen, not using the company to do it, but just staying honest to my true beliefs, that was going to have a negative impact on my company. And I decided to, speak freely as a citizen rather than through the filter of corporate self.
Meet your next pillow.
He started out like I wasn't very rich, or we were kind of poor or something like that, and then could afford to go to private school by 8th grade. So they weren't poor. And a private school in 8th grade, you haven't seen like bad. I don't know why you're so against certain things, and I don't want to. I don't really know if I want to hear all of it. I'm not sure if I want to keep hearing this person, but we're gonna.
One of the best decisions I've made. I've been liberated ever since then, and I've been speaking freely across the country. I wrote 3 books. 2 of them are out. 3rd one's coming out this year. Been to a majority of states across this country, speaking about the perils of the woke religion, speaking about the perils of so-called stakeholder capitalism, using companies to advance political values. I've had a front row seat to seeing the toxic impact of that, both on capitalism and I would just say on our society more broadly. But the last piece of this, Candace, that led me to actually take the step of running for president is, even though I was trying to solve these problems through the market, I actually ended up starting another company called Strive to compete with BlackRock and actually use shareholder power to tell companies to go back to focusing on their products and services for profit instead of pushing these ESG values, these environmental and social agendas. And Strive's been incredibly successful in a short amount of time too. As much as I was focused on the top-down problem, the state working with private companies to get their agendas done through the back door that they couldn't get done through the front door, as much as all of that was important, wrote books about it, addressed market solutions. If I was being really honest about it, that trick only works if you have a culture, a populace in this country that's willing to buy up what they're selling. And I wasn't going to solve that through writing books or just the market alone or pointing out the problem. And that's when, my wife and I, we had a really deep discussion about this not that long ago, around Christmas break at the end of last year, saying that, I think that we're going to have a national cultural revival to actually address that bottom-up problem. And that's what led me to this most recent step of the journey in running for president. And the goal wasn't just to run for the sake of running. I think the way we drive that cultural change is actually in the way that Reagan drove a national revival in 1980, by actually succeeding and governing with a cultural vision for national identity in America that I think we're missing. And that's what brought me to the doorstep of this presidential journey.
Vivek, so you are the son of immigrants, is that correct? Like you just said?
Exactly.
And yet, are you arguing with me that you somehow were able to make it in life as a brown person without having to play the victim Olympics? I mean, how did you do it? I've learned via the public school education system that if you are Black or a brown person, you are suffering and you are disadvantaged. It doesn't sound like that has been your life. It's interesting that there is this hyper focus on Black people that look like me, and yet they do sort of like to ignore the conversation about why it is that actually the most successful group in America is not white Americans, it's Asian Americans. So what do you think is the driver of your success? You're supposed to be a victim. You are brown. Why don't you have this perspective that woe is you?
Well, it's a shame, Candace, because I actually even see this in my extended family, in the Asian American community, Indian American community now. The next generation, so people who are in my kids' generation, right, my nieces, nephews' generation, they're now taught to see themselves as victims again, because that's how you get into college. Right? You have to have a sob story. I got into, I got into the top elite universities by succeeding academically without apologizing for it. Now the next generation, we see those kids that actually are spinning up these victimhood tales to see themselves as persons of color, to sort of say that we, the Indian Americans, are more like the Black community than like somebody else because we need to use victimhood as a currency. That worries me. That's part of what sent me on the journey I'm on right now. But for me, my dad had this saying growing up, right? Everybody runs into hardship. Okay, so I told you what my upbringing was a little bit like, but it was like very academically focused. Family was everything. Academic success was everything, and that was really different. So the public school I went through, like I think it was majority Black. If not, it was close. It was a school district that was built through a patchwork of annexations, including some poorer communities. I'm really grateful for the experience, and it was really different than the Catholic school experience I had when I was the lone Hindu kid in the Catholic school too. But I will say that, academic achievement wasn't something that was prized in these other families. In fact, many of these kids, largely Black kids, came from single parent households. Big difference. Was I privileged? Yes, I was privileged, not monetarily, not financially, but privileged to have a family that had 2 parents in the household that made a sacrifice for their kids. And there's the two things that my dad used to say. One is you can make a sacrifice if you know what you're sacrificing for. Right? So you enter a marriage. Okay, you're giving something up. Well, so be it. It's worth sacrificing for. You want to have kids. You're giving something up. So be it. Our parents were invested. And my brother and I both went on to found companies. My brother's a really successful entrepreneur in his own right. That came from having a strong family foundation. But the other thing they taught me was, even more than my brother, I was kind of like the nerdy, kid with glasses, skinny kid with glasses and a funny last name and a dad who had a funny accent, growing up in Southwest Ohio. And his, it was this corny little mantra, but it was actually true and I value it much more now. He says, if you're going to stand out, you might as well be outstanding. And so for me, achievement was kind of my ticket to get ahead. And even when I think about like my policy planks in this presidential race, for example, right, one of the things I said on day one is that I'm pledging to end affirmative action in America. Race-based affirmative action has been a cancer on our national soul.
Well, it's racist.
And
it's actually
racist.
It's racist.
It's outright racist. It's racist in every direction. It's a form of racism against white people and Asian people. That's the most obvious piece of it. But it is also fueling and fostering anti-black racism in our country. I have not met a black colleague or classmate in my life who wasn't capable inherently of accomplishing everything I have in my life. Now, the circumstances they grow up in or the culture that they're taught to grow up in, that's a different story. But it is racist to tell these kids that you can't achieve what I achieved without the government or some system giving you a hand up. That is psychological slavery. Actually, I'll talk about slavery in our moment. But I talk about these issues. I bring that up not to get into some policy discussion, but because these issues are deeply personal to me.
That's not the only issue with people. It's not the fucking only issue. Are you serious? You think the only issue is that we're telling them that they can't do it because they're of a minority and it's that mental game? That's the only reason? It's not the actual horrible schools that some people are stuck into. You guys were obviously, you both went to private schools. You both made it into an elite Harvard and Yale and all these fucking places. That doesn't mean that you're average. That doesn't mean that you have the same experience. That's ridiculous. That's an absolute absurd if and. That's not an if and connection, okay? If this and that, no, it's not. It's not a connection that make no.
Idea of achievement as a way to get ahead in America, meritocracy as a way to get ahead in America, that's deeply personal to me. I wouldn't have achieved what I had if this wasn't a country that prized merit. And my dad, I spoke about my dad earlier. He's actually kind of a lefty. He won't use that word, but he's definitely, a left-leaning guy. But if there's one issue that lights him up more than anything else, it's actually this issue of anti-meritocratic policies. Like if he sees that Virginia's...
Oh, he's kind of a lefty because he grew up poor and you grew up middle class to upper class and then rich. So you're obscured, where he maybe grew up poor to middle class. You grew up middle class to upper class. So he's a little bit obscured. Huh.
School, getting rid of national merit scholarships, where it's kind of like Kamala Harris fakely said on stage, I was that little kid, right, in my case. And that, I think it's the fact that it's that deeply personal to me that allows me to touch this issue that's supposed to be an untouchable, affirmative action. Lyndon Johnson actually set affirmative action into motion by an executive order. This is something that a U.S. president can actually address. If it was started by executive order, and I can tell you all about that, you can end it by executive order. Not one president, not even one presidential candidate in U.S. history since then has actually pledged to end affirmative action. And the reason why is they're dancing around the issue. And for them, maybe it's like in the policy rankings of what their policy briefing people say. They'd say that's a political battle we don't want to fight. For me, it's just deeply personal. I don't care what the politics of it are. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. And so in some sense, I think it's because of what this country gave me and the foundation that my parents gave me as well that lead me to a lot of the policy views that I'm embracing pretty unapologetically. Because you know what? It's not about the politics of it. It's about the truth of it. Yeah. And that was a little bit about what my upbringing was like that led me to some of my views.
Well, first, I do want to say also for our listeners that something else to know about affirmative action is that it actually harms Black people that purportedly benefit from it. And Thomas Sowell did a great job examining this. He was an adjunct professor. I want to say it was Cornell. I could be wrong. And he recognized that everybody that was on academic probation, all of the Black kids that were there were on academic probation. And he went to go investigate why that was. And he realized that when you mismatch people, he's like, these people were the cream of the crop. If you had put them out of school based on what they actually knew and didn't force them into schools that were actually above their academic caliber, they would have been at the top of the class. But instead, because they were swimming with people that were more academically capable, they were at the bottom of the class. And so it actually harms people by mismatching them into universities. And so it's very important. Clarence Thomas has written extensively about that problem as well. And I am also a person that believes that affirmative action should be abolished. Now, it's interesting that you point out people have not talked about this issue. You are correct. Yep. Even on the right, I have so many criticisms on the right, and I'm going to get into those, so I want to hear.
Why don't we talk about economic disparity? Let's talk about generational wealth. Let's talk about schools. Let's talk about policing. Let's talk about communal availability, food deserts. Let's talk about any of the things that actually influence the situation and not the bullshit you just spouted, you bullshit spouting, rich, fucking, unattached pricks. Done with this. Done.
All you do in your DAW, whatever DAW it is literally just drag and drop.
Not doing that anymore. All right. We're not done with Vivek, but we're done with that fucking clip. Oh my goodness. Candace is the worst. She really is the worst.
Faith, patriotism, and hard work have disappeared, only to be replaced by new secular religions like COVIDism, climatism, and gender ideology.
We hunger to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet we cannot even answer the question of what it means to be an American. Today, the woke left preys on that vacuum. They tell you that your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation govern who you are, what you can achieve, and what you're allowed to think. This is psychological slavery, and that has created a new culture of fear in our country that has completely replaced our culture of free speech in America. And that is why today I am announcing my run for President of the United States. This isn't just a political campaign. This is a cultural movement to create a new American dream for the next generation. To me, the American dream means you believe in merit, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. It means you believe the people who we elect to run the government are the ones who actually run the government, not a federal bureaucracy that grows like a national cancer that is now metastasizing to the private sector. It means that the best ideas win instead of getting censored. It means you don't have to choose between speaking your mind freely and putting food on the dinner table. It means you believe these ideals form the backbone of the greatest nation.
We believe in American exceptionalism. Now that is fucking propaganda right there. We believe in American exceptionalism. It's fucking stupid.
On Earth that the rest of the world still looks up to as its example.
Hello,
not the Soviet Union in the last
motherfucker.
century, and not communist China in this one either.
Hello. Thanks for the follow. I'm going to take some edibles for that. Cheers. We're talking Vivek, and then we're going to do some documentaries after this. But this tool bag for a minute. Thanks for the follow. Gave me some edibles, now let's see what happens. Ha ha ha.
That is the new American dream. Ask yourself if you believe in these ideals. I think most of you do. I think most of you believe your neighbors do too, though you can't be sure because you don't feel free to talk about it anymore. You might disagree with each other about corporate tax rates or about whether ivermectin treats COVID, but those are details. We still agree on our nation's most fundamental principles. At least most of us do. Yet the goal of the ruling party in this country is to convince us that we are divided. Why? So they can accumulate more power for themselves. Well, you know what?
You only showed Democrats there. If you wanted to be a true anti-divisive, you would have showed a Republican in there too. But you're not. You're divisive as well. You're divisive as well, you tool.
Have a dream that we can be one people again. We have obsessed so much over our diversity and our differences that we forgot all the ways we're really just the same as Americans, bound together by a common set of ideals that brought together a divided, diverse, headstrong group of people 250 years ago. And I believe deep in my bones that those ideals still exist, and I am running for president to revive them. E pluribus unum. From many, one. That is the dream that won the American Revolution. That is the dream that reunited us after the Civil War. That is the dream that won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is the dream that still gives hope to the free world today. And if we can revive that dream over fractious group identity, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we will need to revive to save this great nation.
Not a virus. You haven't seen any of the movies I've seen, because viruses... I mean, there's all sorts of movies for it, but it has definitely been a few Hollywood blockbusters that virus wipe us out. And it could absolutely wipe us out. And to say that not a virus is going to beat America is the stupidest hillbilly crap you could say. And you're educated in pharmaceuticals. You're educated in like cancer treatments and stuff, and you're going to say that no virus can wipe us out, America? That's very shallow thinking. That is very simplistic thoughts. Let's see what Toolbags has to say here.
Bats. Okay, we're blind bats flying around in a cave, and we're trying to figure out where we are. How does a bat figure out where it is? A bat figures out where it is because it can't see. It doesn't have eyes. It sends out sonar signals. We learned in science class. You call it echolocation. You send out a sonar signal, it echoes back, it tells you where you are. So you send out a signal, bounces off something that is true, bounces off faith in God. It says, okay, that bounces back. It tells me where I am. Bounces off the family. The 2 parents that brought me into this world. My family bounces back, okay. It says that's part of my identity. Bounces off of belief in a nation. I'm a citizen of this nation. I send the signal, okay, that tells me a little.
I don't believe in nations. I don't believe in governments. I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in sanctions. I don't believe in war. I don't believe in you. You're a tool bag.
A little bit about who I am. I work hard. I create something. I'm proud of it. Great. That bounces back. It tells me where I am. But when those things disappear, when God disappears, when country disappears, when family disappears, when hard work disappears, you know what happens? We send out that signal, and then nothing comes back. That's why we're lost in this abyss. You ask yourself why in our country, why is it that we want to bend the knee to some authority? You want to know why? It's because we're lost in the desert. You know, the Israelites, when they were lost in the desert, they could not see the promised land. What did they say? I want to go back and bend the knee to Pharaoh. Why do we want to go back and bend the knee? It's because we're lost. Today in America, we are lost in that desert. Okay, so we can criticize the pharaoh all we want. Republicans do it all the time. Big government, big business, whatever it is. You can blame the pharaoh, but that's only half the story. You got to look inside and ask yourself, what is it that makes me want to bend the knee?
If you feed your dog dry food...
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize how much I was going to dislike this person after, like, seriously, after I do these, like, I never want to talk about this person again in my life. Oh my goodness. Okay. One last one, everybody. One last Vivek moment. Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek at CPAC 2023. I'm all in on America first. Dur, 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 dur. I took dur, 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 dur. And no, I'm not going to subscribe to Fox News. That guy I'm listening to has a dumbass. All right, well, I'm agreeing. I love that take. Thank you very much for that. That is fantastic. Your first comment is fantastic. Let's actually go ahead and give some love to that, because that is fucking hilarious. Yeah, I agree. Let's see what he says to a room full of idiots.
Please welcome co-founder Strive Asset Management, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the warm welcome. I've been walking the halls. Feel like a lot of you know me this year. And then every fifth person comes up and says, "Are you Cash Patel?" And I'm like, no. They still don't know me. So it's good to be back. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story from a few years ago when I had to make a choice. Okay, this is going to be a speech about choice, by the way. I had to make a choice in 2020. This is back when I was a biotech CEO. It was a multi-billion-dollar company. I'd founded, I'd built it from scratch. But in 2020, after George Floyd died, I was expected to make a...
He likes how he likes to say, "I built it from scratch." So that tells me that he had some investors, he had some money, and he feels like he did it all, but really he is not as important as he thinks he is. And anybody I've met like that in this kind of realm, I am a traveling bartender at high-end places, so I have worked with some very rich people. Actually, I work with almost exclusively rich people, and they have an ego to them. This guy has that ego. This guy has that ego that I hate. And I don't know if it's just me vibing it, but I just really dislike this person a lot. So we'll only do like 2 minutes more.
Statement in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a choice. I chose not to do it. I said that our purpose as a company is to make medicines, to make products and services for people who need them. But that was the beginning of a 6-month journey.
And make a stupid amount of money on it, charging them. Like he said, it was like one of the things he did was some sort of cancer treatment or tumor treatment of some sort. And it's like anybody that does money for cancer treatments is usually the worst person ever. Usually they're bad people. They're very bad people. If you make profit off of cancer, you're not a good person. That's my theory. And it's a pretty sound theory, actually.
That culminated about 6 months later in 3 prominent advisors to my company resigning. And I had to make a choice. Was I going to speak through the filter of corporate self-interest, or was I going to speak freely as a citizen? And from that moment forward, I chose to speak freely as a citizen. Thank you. I wrote Woke Inc. I wrote Nation of Victims. I traveled the country calling out the woke industrial complex in America. I started a new company called Strive to take on BlackRock and the ESG movement through the market itself, saying that it's not their job to tell us to use our dollars and how we live our lives. I called out the 3 secular religions in America that have America in a chokehold today. The first of them is this woke racial religion that says your identity is based on your skin color, that if you're black, you're inherently
Oh, I thought he was going to say, the evangelicals, or possibly the Protestants, or possibly the Mormons. But no, he went to the woke religion.
Advantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged, no matter your economic background or your upbringing. That your race determines who you are and what you can achieve in life. It's one that Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of the Squad summed up really well when she said, "We don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice." I do not fit her description of what counts as a brown voice, I assure you that. But it's a really clever move in this religion, which is this. If your race goes from being about your skin color to being about the content of the ideas you're allowed to espouse, then any disagreement with those ideas automatically makes you a racist. And there's no greater damnation in modern America than to be called a racist. So when
Anti-Semite. That's the quickest. That's the quickest string pull. People call you an anti-Semite for almost anything nowadays. Like, all you have to do is say, "I don't like governments," and you don't like the Israel government. I mean, it's just, yeah. He's just gonna go on this whole thing. You're a successful brown person, so therefore, brown people just need to be told that they can be successful, and then they can be successful. And you're telling it to a room full of white people, so it's gonna go over really well. It's just gonna really, ring true with all these people because you're screaming it to a room full of white people, and I don't appreciate it. And I think that this is about as long as I can deal with this person. Which what we did? I started at 11:30, so 25 minutes of Vivek Ramaswamy. That's actually plenty. That's plenty. We saw that this person has spent a massive amount of money on Republican contributions. They have given a lot of money to the Republican Party, and now they are running Republican. Congratulations, Vivek. I never want to hear your name again, and I will probably not listen to another word you say up until the debates. I watch all the debates, though, guys, and I'll probably try to do some sort of clip down for that, because I do watch every debate, and I have watched every debate in the last 10 years, so there's that. But I'm done with this person. Let's cut it and not do this anymore. And yeah, let's call that good. So we will move on to our documentaries. I have some environmental stuff requested via one of our VIP regulars wanting some environmental talk. So we're going to talk some environment, and then we're going to do some black and white CIA KGB black and white propaganda. It's one of our favorite things here. It's so much fun watching like 1945, 1940s our army literal propaganda films. They're fantastic. But first, let's start out with a warm-up clip into the environment.
Do you love getting high, but
Yes.
smoke?
Yes, I love getting high. I'm fucking literally getting high right now. But Delta 9 sucks. Delta 8 sucks. Only